See, I hear the music in my head. We are live. It is not even 7 o'clock yet. 6:55, getting an early start with my dinosaur shirt on. What's up? Hopefully you guys are doing good. I put a video up today. Hopefully you guys have all taken a look at it. Yeah, that's right. Spinners or tops or the Temptations or something. Hopefully you guys are taking a look at it. It is about a comparison between the Sloppy Stage 2 and the Truck Norris cam run on a supercharger, also run NA and also run on a turbo, which we have done previously, just to show you all the things that I've been telling you for all these years. Guess what? It's kind of true, at least. And you have no idea how often that this comes up. First of all, I just got back from a run, so I got some Gatorade. That's good Gatorade. Stay hydrated, my friends. You have no idea how many times I have this conversation, whether it's about I get it, oddly enough, a lot from carbureted guys or guys that are trying to get camshafts for carbureted combinations. Oh, carburetor needs a different camshaft. You got to have a carbureted cam. I'm like, how is your motor like a mind reader? Does it know that you just put a carbureted camshaft in there? Does it even know that it has a carburetor on it? No, it doesn't. That's why I like doing these tests. And I've done these tests not just this time. I've done it many, many times in the past. I did it with a little Extreme Energy 265, the XR 265 cam from Comp, which is basically like a truck cam, similar to the Truck Norris cam. I did it way back in the day with the Extreme Energy 274 cam for the 5-liter. Just ran it with NA and ran it with a blower and ran it with a turbo and ran it with nitrous and ran it with all this stuff and ran it with a positive displacement blower. And guess what? This is a thing that nobody will tell you. I feel like I'm a conspiracy theorist. They won't tell you that it works. If you have a cam in your motor and you put any of these other things on there, they will work. You can run nitrous with a stock camshaft, which obviously that's not a nitrous cam. You can run a turbo with a stock camshaft, and it's obviously not a turbo cam. You can run a centrifugal blower, again, not a centrifugal blower cam. You can run a PD blower, like a Roots blower or Whipple or Kenny Bell. That camshaft was not designed for that. You run a turbo. You can run a carburetor on there. You can take your fuel injection off if you have a fuel injected motor, and then you could run a carburetor on it on your stock motor, and it will work. That's the thing that people won't tell you, especially people that design camshafts. Oh no, you got to have a custom cam for that. You got to have a carburetor cam, or you got to have a blower cam, or you got to have a turbo cam, or whatever. And again, I'm not saying those things don't exist and that those things might not work better. What I'm saying is the camshaft that you have, whatever it is, you can put anything that you want on. If you are running around and your car is running around and driving around and it works well, it takes throttle, it makes power, it has a good curve, it's not misfiring, not doing anything silly, and you take a fuel injection off and you put a carburetor on there, it will run just fine. If you leave the fuel injection on there and run nitrous, it will run just fine. If you put a carburetor on there and then put nitrous on it, it will run just fine. If you put boost of any kind with a turbo, a centrifugal blower, a Roots blower, Whipple, Kenny Bell, whatever, put any kind of combination on there you want, it will work. It will make power. And the confusion for a lot of people is I think by now, certainly the people that are watching this video, they kind of get that. They kind of understand that, look, it is going to work. I don't have to have a dedicated turbo cam for my turbo combination. A Sloppy Stage 2 cam, like the one that I tested in the video that I put up today, is not a turbo cam. And yet Matt has run it successfully endless times and obviously endless people. I don't know how many hundreds of those cams they sold. I'm sure that it's a lot. And so kudos to the guys at Elgin for coming out with that camshaft. But that's not a magic camshaft. And I tried to make that point to people long ago when they're saying, oh, yeah, this camshaft does everything. I'm like, no. Well, yes, it does. You can run that with a high ram. You can run it with a 4.8. You can run it with a 6.0. You can run it with a turbo. You can run it with nitrous. You can run it with whatever. But guess what? That's not the only camshaft that you can do that with. That's partly why in this video I compared two camshafts. Not particularly because I cared so much about the Truck Norris cam and the Sloppy Stage 2 cam particularly, although they are kind of fairly big names now and they're heavy hitters in the industry. So I'm sure that both of those, they sell a lot of those camshafts, but they represent two different things. One of them is is on the big side and one of them is on the smallish side. And as we saw NA, they do different things. The truck Norris cam makes more power down low, and then the sloppy stage 2 cam is bigger and it makes more power up top. And I got a lot of comments about that of people, as they always do, trying to dissect stuff. Well, it's because of the LSA. You know, the LSA is what made it a better blower cam. I'm like, two things. One, it's not a better blower cam. It's just a bigger cam, so it makes power up top that the smaller truck Norris cam doesn't. And we've illustrated that now. I've actually illustrated it 4 times. You haven't seen the carbureted combination, but here's a little secret. It does the same thing. So we've illustrated that many times, and it does that same thing. It's not because of the LSA. It's because it's a bigger cam, and this is what bigger cams do. They make less power down low and more up top. So I just wanted to illustrate that kind of thing using 2 cams. We could pick other cams. We could pick a torque cam or some cam from Texas Speed. I'm not as familiar with their stuff, but I'm hoping to do some stuff with them, or from Steve over at Cam Motion or Comp or whoever. We could pick a small cam. The smallest one obviously would be stock. So you could pick a stock cam and then pick the biggest cam that we could put in there, something that just barely fits available piston to valve clearance. And that would give us both extremes of the cam selection ability, at least with stock piston to valve clearance. And guess what? Both of those cams would do exactly the same thing. What a lot of people don't tell you is here's how people that want to sell you cams, here's what they do. Okay, here's the camshaft you need. And then they rattle off, it needs to be this lift and needs to have this intake opening and this intake closing. And this, you know, it's going to come out to this LSA, whatever, based on the duration numbers and stuff. And they tell you this will work. And then you put it in there and guess what? It works. Oh, that guy must be a genius. No, because if he picked different lift and duration numbers, it would also work. In fact, if he picked any camshaft on his shelf, if he just walked over onto his shelf and closed his eyes and grabbed the camshaft at random and you put it in your car, especially if you're comparing it to a stock one, you're going to get a big change in NA power, especially on an LS, because we all look like heroes picking any camshaft other than the stock one from an LS. So if you go over and grab any kind of camshaft and put it in, it's going to make more power. And then when it makes more power, whatever it does NA, guess what it's going to do under boost? Guess what it's going to do with a turbo? Guess what it's going to do with nitrous? Guess what it's going to do with a roots blower or a centrifugal blower? It's going to do exactly that. And I don't want to make it sound like I'm trashing on the camshaft manufacturers or the designers, because they obviously know a lot more about that than I do. But they don't do nearly as much testing. And they won't tell you that, hey, look, when I picked this cam, this special cam with magic valve events, I didn't ever show you a comparison on the dyno because they normally don't have that. I never showed you that. I never showed you what it did NA. And then now why it's going to do what it does with boost or with nitrous. Because I get that question asked a lot also about nitrous, not just the carburetor stuff, but about nitrous too. Well, what cam should I pick for nitrous? And again, nitrous for me is all about the starting point. And again, unless you're talking about 3 or 4 different kits on a Pro Mod motor, we're not talking about that. I don't deal with engines like that. For the normal range of this cam will fit in stock piston to valve clearance, wherever you start the NA power, the nitrous is just going to add to that, just like boost does. So if you put a camshaft in that takes you from, we'll use a 5.3 as example, takes you from 350 horsepower to 450 horsepower. You just put a camshaft in, you got 100 horsepower, great. And you add 100 shot. So if we were to add 100 shot to our 350 combination, we'd get 400. Because that 100 shot of nitrous will add 100 horsepower. That's how much nitrous you're supplying. So it will add that much power to our 350 horsepower motor. And that's well within the range of the ability of the motor to ingest and process that much power. It's already making 3 times as much nitrous as we're processing, so it can easily handle that. But again, if we have a 450 horsepower motor and now we add 100 shot to it, now we'll make 550 horsepower. So what happens often is that a guy tells you, oh, here, put this nitrous cam in. You put that nitrous cam in, you put your 100 shot on, and all of a sudden you're at 550 horsepower. Oh, yeah, that thing worked great. It just did what it did. It did what it did because the camshaft added the first 100, and then the nitrous added the second 100. The nitrous just was on top of whatever was there. If you went from 350 to 400, the nitrous would just add 100. If somehow you could magically go from 350 to 500 with just a cam, it's not really possible on a 5.3. But if you could, instead of 500, we add 100 shot, you'd be making 600. It's just the starting point plus what you're adding. And then the turbos do the same thing. The centrifugal blower does the same thing. All of that, that's how 95% of it works out. But I can't get, it's really hard for me to get guys to fathom that, because again, they've been indoctrinated into thinking, okay, I got to get this special kind of cam that has more exhaust flow or more exhaust duration or this kind of exhaust valve event to work with the nitrous. And I tell them the same thing. How much ever power you want to make, the more power you can make NA, the more nitrous you could add to it, because the amount of nitrous that you can add to it is a function of the NA power. So you can only add a certain percentage is what we normally come across when we run stuff on the dyno. It will only process a certain amount. So let's say that you could get it to process 100%. So if you have a 300 horsepower motor, you add a 300 shot, which in my experience would be very, very difficult. But if you could, you had a 300 shot to that, and that's 100%. That might not work. It has nothing to do with cam timing, and it has everything to do with the fact that you're trying to add as much power with the nitrous as the motor already makes. That's difficult to do. If you take your 350 horsepower motor and add our magic camshaft to it, and now it makes 450 horsepower, and we add our same 300 shot, you can do that, because now the 300 is a much smaller percentage of that 450, and the motor will now process that. And so that's how you have to think of it. I tell them, look, figure out what your starting point needs to be to run the amount of nitrous that you want to run. And also think about it in terms of how much ultimate power you want to make. If all you want to do is add 100 shot, you can just add that to your stock motor. I did that on my 5-liter Mustang and ran around on it and beat lots of people with just a simple, wet fogger kit on my 5-liter, and it worked very well. But that was back in the day. Now things are making much more power. They're making NA power on what I was making on the nitrous. So if you can start out at some level and then add the nitrous to that, if you want to make more, start out at a higher level. You can also add more nitrous. But if you start out at a higher level, you can successfully add even more nitrous. Same thing with boost. And we've gone over this many times. If you start with a 300 horsepower motor and you add 14.7 pounds, you get 600. If you do that with a 400 horsepower motor and you add the same amount of boost, you get 800. 500 gets you 1,000. That's how it all works out. Ultimately, in a lot of cases, if you are wanting the 1,000 horsepower and you have 400 or 450, you just have to run more boost. You don't have to make a 500 horsepower NA motor, because the turbo is ultimately going to dictate what happens. And lucky for you, the turbo doesn't just run at 14.7 pounds of boost. It runs effectively also at 20 pounds or 22 pounds or 23 pounds or whatever it takes to get you to the number that you want to get to. If that's 1,000 horsepower and the turbo can support that kind of flow, both on the hot side and the cold side, you can obviously get there. So our poll for tonight is, will the turbo ever replace the supercharger? I'm going to say completely, just to throw that little bit of spice in there. Okay, so will a turbo ever completely replace the supercharger? So that's our poll for tonight, because that's what the thumbnail was about. And what I want to know is, and I have a video coming out later on this. The next video that goes up is going to be the 1,000 horsepower big block Chevy combo. So I've got a nitrous combo, a blower combo, and a turbo combo. I don't think I've ever run anything NA that made 1,000 horsepower on a big block. I've been in the mid 9s, but I don't think I've ever done anything that made 1,000, because I've never run anything that was kind of a dedicated NA build for the big block stuff. I've never run a super high compression one with a really good oiling system and the things that you would need to actually make 1,000 horsepower. We got into the, I think, 930 or 940 range with that tunnel ram 565, but it was only like 10.5 to 1 compression. So it would be, it would take some more compression to kind of get there. The turbos. So the turbos, are the turbos going to replace blowers? The thing is that we know, and this video will be coming up, we're compare on that 5.3, we're going to compare the turbo versus the blower, and we see already kind of from the data that's there that the turbo makes a lot more power per pound of boost. It just does. It doesn't have the parasitic loss associated with driving the blower. So for any combination, if you run 7 pounds on a turbo and you run 7 pounds on a blower, the 7 pounds from the turbo is going to make a lot more power if you start out with the same NA motor. So they're obviously a lot more efficient. They have the ability to make more power per pound of boost, which also means then that you could probably run this thing safer and probably at a lower charge temperature, especially compared to a roots blower. The turbo seems like it has a lot of things going for it. So why hasn't everybody completely eliminated the supercharger? Either a roots blower, a twin screw, or centrifugal, because they all have varying amounts of parasitic loss associated with driving them. And even within those different families, you also have different percentages of effectiveness, a roots blower being the lowest. And then the guys from the twin screw camp will argue about whether or not theirs is more efficient than a centrifugal. The compressor mats I've seen on some of the really good centrifugals are like a turbo. So the compressor map seems to be much better on a centrifugal. They just don't have anywhere near the kind of response that a positive displacement blower does. They have a rising boost curve, and so it's not nearly as good. So they all have their issues. And yet we see, especially on OEM applications, we see these Eaton superchargers, which they obviously do an excellent job, and they're able to make the kind of power, especially with these new 2650s. They've kind of got the market covered from more than 1,000 horsepower on down, which is a big percentage of what guys are doing. And I remember telling the guys from Kenny Bell for years, I'm like, you guys have it good right now because they're building, M90s and these 112s. I said, but if they ever decide to make something that's like 1,000 horsepower blower, I said, it's going to be really tough to compete, because even though a twin screw might ultimately be better, that's a hard sell to tell them, hey, look, you're picking up 40 horsepower or whatever from better parasitic, a reduction in parasitic loss, which the twin screw seems to have, and also a slightly lower charge temperature. But that's a hard sell if the blower is 10% or 20% or 100% more than a comparable roots blower is, and especially a TVS, a twin screw with this, twisted lobe design is even more efficient yet than the older, simpler roots style. And so they've made great ends into the aftermarket version. So they're doing well. But the thing is, they still require power to drive them. Just all of those blowers do. And yet the OEMs tend to use them a great deal. They tend to use the superchargers. We see the ZR1 stuff, the Lightning stuff from back in the day, the 03 Cobra, on and on and on. There's lots of different versions that they use these positive displacement blowers on, and they work very well. And also some twin screw applications like the Hellcat and stuff. Those work very well, and so they use them a lot. Let me know what you guys think. Why do you guys think that the turbo has not completely replaced it? Because I know a lot of, there are things that are associated with the turbo. One, when you're anti-turbo, the first thing you bring up is turbo lag. Oh, they got turbo lag. Well, an OEM application, if you haven't driven an OEM turbo application that comes on at like 1,800 RPM, turbo lag is, I guess is subjective. If you can have maximum boost at 1,800 RPM, that's doing pretty well. They don't have the immediate response that a roots blower does. They obviously generate more heat. I think I would argue also that maybe boost control and the programming is more sophisticated for a turbo than it is for a supercharger. But the other thing that I don't like about the supercharger applications is that, and particularly the OEM, even aftermarket ones, Magnuson and Eat or Edelbrock and those kinds of things, is that they almost always incorporate the short runner manifolds, like the one that I ran on the 5.3. By design and packaging, they almost have to. The blower has to fit under a hood or some sort of reasonable hood clearance. And so the intake manifold design, almost by default, has to be some sort of short runner common plenum. And then when you toss in the fact that it's a really good idea with a roots blower that's just traditionally less effective or less efficient than a turbo or centrifugal blower, you want an intercooler in there. And those for packaging are almost always air to water intercoolers. I know like the 3.8 liter Ford, the Super Coupe, had an air to air, and they managed to offset mount the blower and run it through a tube and go through an air to air intercooler, and that works. But that's the exception and not the rule. Most of them are air to water intercoolers packaged under the blower, and that works fairly well. But that packaging and the position of the intercooler kind of dictates that you can't have lots of runner going across there because the intercooler is sticking down right in the middle of that common plenum. And so that, again, dictates that you have short runner. And the short runners, take away low speed power. So that's why the turbo and the centrifugal blower do better than they would otherwise if you were just to run their combination with that same lower manifold. It would be much worse than allowing them to blow through some sort of factory long runner intake. On the LS, we would look at the truck or Trailblazer SS. On any of the other applications, modular Ford or Coyote or anything, they all have intake manifolds that have fairly generous runner length, and that helps to promote low speed torque production. And the positive displacement stuff kind of gets rid of that. Now, it does offset that a little bit with immediate boost response, because as soon as you're making boost, which is almost immediate, and you're making a lot of boost almost immediately, it obviously adds a lot more than enough of that low speed power back. But it would be even better if it had that kind of response that we traditionally associate with a positive displacement blower, and it had runner length. It would just be better all the way around. So those are some of the things. So let me know what you guys think. Do you think that and we're looking at the poll here, do you think that the turbos will just completely replace the superchargers in the future for other things? I mean, before we get to eliminating internal combustion engines altogether and be forced to drive electric motors, which, by the way, do have immediate response. So if you want immediate response, electric motor will definitely do that. But those are my thoughts on the turbo and blower stuff. Obviously, my argument always is when people say, "Oh yeah, but a turbo is just so much more efficient; it makes more horsepower per pound of boost." And I've shown that. I have videos up on the channel where we ran the roots blower and the twin screw and the centrifugal and the turbo all on the same kind of engine, and show the different power curves associated with each kind. And in all of those cases, at least at wide open throttle, and run at the same boost level and the same air fuel and the same timing, when you're doing that, the turbo shines. Because when you can make 100 more horsepower or so at the same boost level with a turbo than you can with a blower, it's hard not to take notice to that. But yet again, people select the blower an awful lot also, despite the fact that it doesn't make as much power. And then they will argue, turbo lag and all that stuff. So it's an interesting deal. Okay, so let's see what you guys got going on. Scott's going to put a blower on his electric car. Just put a Kenny Bell boosted pump. Blowers are simpler to tune. I think that's true. Yeah, Eddie Hill, for a while there, he was the fastest man on land and water. Just thinking about making a Turbo Survivor top fuels exhaust, and then you realize the exhaust has to live too. Yeah, they won't let you run turbos. My 671 hangs off the drinker's side. Isn't that both the driver's side and the passenger side? I would hope so, because you should be sharing. I mean, otherwise it's just rude. If you can make the runners as long as you want, if you can remote mount the blower, that's a good idea. Richard, did you run a road race cam in your Mustang? I did. And at the Silver State, I ran a top speed cam. Compound unit does work. Richard, checking out a video made about inexpensive versus expensive carbs
Any plans to include Edelbrock or other carb brands? Also, would you overcarb with mechanical secondaries? I don't think you're going to, the overcarbing is going to be more a function of the carb size. The mechanical secondary is not going to be a function of that. And I haven't tried Edelbrock and other stuff. The Brawler was the low buck kind of option there. Suggestions for twin turbos for my 3.9 liter. Do you really need 2 turbos on a 3.9 liter engine? If you do, they're going to be pretty small. Currently in the midst of building a turbo 334 stroker Ford. Not sure what size would work best. Originally I wanted to run twins, but I think it would be too much for that small bore engine. The size of the engine doesn't matter as long as you combine it with the proper size turbos. A lot of times single and twin stuff is just packaging, whatever you can fit. A 334 Ford stroker can easily be fed by a single turbo. Just let us know how much power you want, and we can recommend a turbo for you, or twins if you want. What is the difference in rod and main bearing wear between a turbo and a blower? I don't think you'd have the wear. I think would be more apt to be worse on the front main bearing. Probably not rod bearing difference. We had, I remember when we were doing the Vortex stuff and we would tighten the belts a lot. If you have a spring-loaded belt, that's less of an issue. But we had like a fixed belt tensioner. There was no spring in it, and so we would tighten the heck out of it, and that's not good for the front main bearing. How did turbo superchargers work? I think they had them on World War II aircraft. You can combine the two. Turbo superchargers are just turbos. Yeah, they were just calling it that because it was it had a supercharging effect, I guess. How do you free up an engine that seized up from sitting for years? You can spray a bunch of penetrating stuff in there and hammer the pistons out from the bottom. Love the turbo, but I ran 1071 water cooled 540 blueprint power adder. You have a water cooled 1071? Who sold me on blueprint power adder? Yep, that's right. But if you notice on the 540 power adder, I didn't run a 1071, I ran a 671, but I also ran a Procharger and a turbo and nitrous. Well, actually 2 turbos. Turbo and supercharging is called twin charging or compound. How about a turbo feeding a blower running off nitrous? Okay. Yeah, Andy's right that they had they basically wanted it for altitude compensation, because as you go up in altitude, especially higher altitude, higher than we normally go, the land lubbers, we lose a lot of power at high altitudes that planes would be flying at. With a turbo, how do you duplicate the sound 2 feet behind your ears and a 22-foot pickle fork with 394 fire dome Hemi? What sound do you want? You want it to sound like a blower? Richard, what's the best way for a 95 5-liter Mustang to make more power for the least of money? Cam and springs are going to be your best bet. The problem with a 5-liter is you need a couple of things. I would put cam and springs and boost on it, and then that way you don't have to change the heads, because with a 5-liter, all of those things are limiting. The stock cam is very limiting. The stock cam of all of the things is actually the best thing. The stock cam is actually not terrible.
but the heads are not great and the intake manifold's not great. And then you can always add boost to it. So how is our poll doing? Will the turbo ever completely replace the supercharger? No, we have no at 88%. Oh, the cog belt. Okay. Yeah, some guys like on those boats. The roots blowers are very, very popular in boats. Speaking of long runner, short runner, 302 stock block, do you prefer Cobra, Street Heat, or Victor Jr. intake to pair with Extreme Energy 275? For a street car, I wouldn't pick the Victor Jr. That would be the least of that would be the last choice. The Cobra and a Street Heat, it's been so long since I think when I was testing the Cobras, I don't even think the Street Heat was out yet. I think that those two would be comparable. I think the nod would probably go to the Street Heat. Yeah, definitely hit the like button. We got 164 people here. We only got 53 likes. Come on, there's more than that. Never been in a supercharged car. They're fun. I mean, if you run in a ZR1 or even an old Lightning or 03, an 03 Cobra is I really like the way that those sound. An 03 Cobra is good. The supercharged Coyote or any of those are good. So Scott, they have the driver golf clubs, Perrier, Grey Poupon, but they also are stylish enough to have a full collection of Monty Python movies. You really only need Holy Grail, but the rest of them are just icing on the cake. I had a friend that had a pickle fork with a mechanically fuel-injected Ford 427 high riser. That would be unique. Now, if you're going to tell me it was one of the reverse rotation FE motors, that would be ultra cool. Might try a single port wet shot pre-throttle body or a dry shot pre-MAF. There you go. Only supercharged car I've ever been in was an 04 Grand Prix when I was a kid. Yeah, those are fun, but not as much fun as the tire spinning rear wheel drive stuff will be. Oil pump recommendation. We run stock ones. If I'm running 2 turbos, sometimes we'll put a high volume in there. I think superchargers in new production cars are mostly there for sound. People love supercharger noise. And yes, Monty Python, the Holy Grail is the best. Yes, it is. What is your quest? To search for the Holy Grail. What is a pickle fork? Come on. No, pickle fork hydro, man. That's all the coolness. Pickle fork hydro boat means it has 2 pointy parts out in the front and a squared off section in the middle. It's where all the air goes to lift up the nose. And so it'll do a blowover. In this age of expensive fuel, could you do a video on mixtures of E85 with 87 octane? How much boost could that mixture safely? So you want to combine E85 with 87, or do you want to originally make the E85 with 87? Because if you're going to put E85 in there, why would you then put 80? Why would you ruin it with 87? Because 87 is going to cost more than the E85 does. Does anybody still make scroll compressors? I haven't seen one of those since VW. The G ladder. I think those were on the Corrados, I think, if I remember right. Todd, what's up, man? If your engine calls for 520 weight oil, if you only add a turbo, do you change oil weight for heat or run the oil weight for the bearing clearance? The oil that you have in there is fine.
Pickle fork is a boat with a split bow. Yes, like I said, two pointy things out. Look at the bones. It's got big pointy teeth. Speaking of which, Richard, have you ever tested Zek's new self-adjusting wet nozzle? I have not. I've not heard of that. What the heck is that? I thought I'd tested most of the Zek stuff. So Adam, a question of preference. So you're wanting to build a drag motor, whatever horsepower you want, but NA, nitrous, blower, or turbo. Car runs the same ish ET with all combos. So I think that when you're spelling all of that out, that you're limiting the other combos, because it'd be really hard for you to build an NA combo that makes even moderate turbo power. So if you were to build like a 5.3 NA and almost any amount of boost, you'll just never get there with a 5.3 NA. So I think that you'd have to run so little boost that just would not be a good kind of combination. The turbo I like of all of those more than any of them. I don't know if I was doing repeatable drag racing. An NA motor I think would be more consistent. Possibly a blower motor. The turbo for a street application in that kind of instance, I would pick the turbo only because with the turbo, you're not limited. Like if you build a dedicated NA motor and you make, let's say you make 600 horsepower because you build a really cool motor, make 600 horsepower. For you to go to 650 is really, really hard. With a turbo, you have 600 horsepower turbo motor. For you to go to 650 is just like, then it's 650 and then it's 700 and then it's 1,000. That's the thing I like most about turbo stuff. But if I was going out and trying to win and run, on the number every time, then probably, yes, I wave my private parts at you. What is the average airspeed of a swallow? African or European? And also, you forgot a very important part about that, an unladen swallow. How is it a king knows so much about swallows? King has to know. Can boost be controlled by the bypass valve? Yes. Blazing Saddles is also good. I'm leaning more toward Holy Grail for quotable comments. Pickle fork is how you rip ball joints before you. That works good too. If I have an 03 Cobra, how can I get my charge temps down? I'm seeing 100 to 130 on average days. Like under cruise or under boost, you can do a couple things. You can change the temperature of your transfer medium, and you do that by either having more reservoir, changing the temperature inside that reservoir, like with ice water, having a better secondary cooler. All of that stuff can happen. Yes, excuse me while I whip this out. Yes. 9's my limit on Schnitzengruben. For the poll, are we talking production or aftermarket? It's all the same. E85 mixed with 87 and 5W20 gives you 8675309. Jenny. Plumbing in space is the biggest issue. Just put all the boost in from the go. Young Frankenstein is one of my favorites. For me, I like Young Frankenstein even better than Blazing Saddles. What big knockers. Why, thank you, doctor. That's what happens when you get an abnormal brain. Yes, Todd, exactly. I like the lady in Blazing Saddles that brought him the pie. There are those who call me Tim. Rabbit stew coming up. Yep, anybody got any dimes? Well, I thought Tim was the shrubberist. Richard, last thing before I go, worth picking up GT40 or GT40 P-heads from a junkyard for my Mustang. Yeah, that'd be 25 or 30 horsepower over the stock stuff. For if you're worried about spark plug placement or headers, don't get the P heads, get the GT40 heads. The Dragnet's also a good one. Yeah, that'd be somebody. That's right. Just the facts, man. I like that he kept changing his hump. Wasn't your hump on the other side? Yeah, Steven, that's a good idea. Rather than just get the heads from the Explorer, just get the whole engine. What hump? No, man, they're quite impressive. Exactly. It's pronounced Frankenstein. Yeah, that's good stuff. The hills are alive with the sound of music. The monster got your wonderful brain. What did you get from him? What are your thoughts on E-gates? I've never tried one. I want to work with the guys at TurboSmart and probably try it and see. Do they say Friedrich? That's right. Are those real? Yes. Real expensive. And don't call me Shirley. Uh-oh, he's veered off into airplane. Miss, I speak jive. What stock inline six responds best power-wise to a turbo? A Barra or an Atlas, maybe? A 2J responds pretty well. An RB. Pulp Fiction, yep. What do they call a quarter pounder in France? In Europe? Did he say France or Europe? I thought it was France. I have not checked out the Red Green show yet. Spaceballs. Funny, she doesn't look Drewish. It's a Royale, that's right. Look at the big brain on Brad. The bigger displacement, the more pound of boost is worth. Yeah, kind of. The more power the NA motor makes because of the metric system. That's right. I picked the wrong day. You like gladiator movies? Yep. It's a big building with patience, but don't call me Shirley. So we're at 88% saying no, that it's not going to replace it. Richard, have you seen any turbos seep oil after hard pull on the dyno, like around the bearing? Yes, we have. Maybe you're overfeeding it. Should it have a restrictor in it? Or you're getting pressure in there? I know Kareem was awesome in that. Scratch my anchor. Uh-oh, Caddyshack. That's maybe my favorite movie everywhere. Cinderella story here at Augusta. The normally reserved Augusta crowd is on his feet for the Cinderella boy. Tears in his eyes, I guess, as he lines up this last shot. Looks like he's got about an 8 iron. He's got a beautiful backswing. Okay, he got all of that one. Oh, it looks like a miraculous shot. It's in the hole. It's in the hole. Yeah, one of my favorites. Here's an uncashed check for $50,000. Keep it. Where'd that go? Right in the wrecking yard. Lumberyard, not wrecking. See, I'm thinking wrecking yard. Lumberyard. Local yard here in Florida is having $50 all you can carry. Nice. I used to have a color TV, red on one side and green on the other. The Varmint Kong, that's right. I tell you what you do. You cut the hamstring. He'll push everything off to the right. He'll quit the game. Planes, Trains, and Automobiles or Tommy Boy? I think Tommy Boy probably of those two. It's full of gunk. It's all ball bearings nowadays. I think you're the greatest. That was great. I love Kareem. I've been watching the rise of the Lakers dynasty. It's on HBO or Netflix or something, and it's awesome. I know that a lot of it is just, stylized for TV, but there's a lot of like good information in there. And I like Kareem in it. And in that movie, he was awesome. I like you, but my dad says you don't play hard enough on defense. That's great. That's the ugliest hat I've ever seen. Oh, but it looks good on you. Yep, Dan, I'd keep playing. It's all in the reflexes. Oh, another good one. That's also one of my top favorites. And in fact, I wrote a sequel for that movie. That's Big Trouble in Little China. It's all in the reflexes. Pork Chop Express. Support from Victor, South Australia. Nice. Down under. We love our Australians. Don't be modest, Judge. You're an incredible slouch. Lacey Underall. Snickers bar. But Casey, it was a Baby Ruth. I got a buddy that power lifts and he can get a pair of motors for $100. Nice. That'd be cool. You just get the big bar and get it on your shoulder and do it. Yep. With a hat like that, you get a free bowl of soup. Hey, babe, I bet you were something before electricity. I said, boys younger to you, as a lecturer, didn't want to do it. Felt I owed to them. How about a Fresca? Oh, yeah, and he takes a bite. That's right, and everybody faints. So you've seen all the movies in Spanish? Yeah, but you lose something in the translation. Snickers bars. Is Snickers over Baby Ruth, really? I never drive faster than I can see. He must have jumped that 50 yards. That's something to be proud of, Rusty. 50 yards. Vacation. What kind of training were you doing? Also good. Well, that was interesting. What do they got? A couple of heavily armed Barishnikovs? What do we got? What heavily armed recreational vehicle? Do you think the EM50 in stripes was supercharger, turbocharged? I hope it was at least a turbo diesel. I've never been this way. I'm sure I've been a lot of ways that you haven't been, ma'am. 75% off for carry. I like that. Yes, in Stripes. That was PJ Souls, who was also in Rock and Roll High School with the Ramones. And was in the original Halloween with Jamie Lee Curtis. I like how he went from turbos and superchargers to John Candy and Bill Murray. That's a natural transition, obviously. Turbo Monza just finished the whole teardown, rebuild the top end, and studying the 6-liter, leaving tomorrow to put 10 to 12 on it in the next 2 weeks after 100 miles on after finished. Okay. Hey, I've got Turbo Monza. I have the valve springs. I have some 26 918s for those 6-cylinder heads. Do you want me to send them to you? I can also send you money if you want so we can buy bigger valves. So let me know and I will get it up to you. Yes, I want to be sedated. I was a huge Ramones fan. I went to see them in San Francisco and they were awesome. And there was much rejoicing. That's right. It is alive. My big man here is going to do it all for us. You're already dirty. Goofy looking dudes. Nobody touches my stuff. Any of you guys touch my stuff and I'll kill you. Anybody calls me Francis and I'll kill you. Lighten up, Francis. I can see where I lost out to guys like you, Lee Harvey. You are a madman. When you and your friend stole your uncle's cow and your friend tried to make it with the cow, I want to party with you, cowboy. Listen, lighten up, Francis. Exactly. Did you see the Ramones interview with what's that guy? No, I didn't. Johnny Rotten is Sex Pistols. I'll be in Livermore tomorrow at 6 to get the trailer to take to Florida. Oh, wow. That's a long trip. Anything new in particular you're looking at forward to playing with? The 3800 Big Bang will be awesome. I've got lots of stuff that I need to put back together. Something you haven't. Yeah, I'd like to run the sprint motor on the dyno. And I also have some secret ones, some other guys' stuff that's coming up. Yeah, Todd's all good stuff. That's what happens when guys get together, whether it's in a shop or whatever, especially guys that are, if you're like a movie guy, I'm all in on that. Rotary mufflers, what makes a quiet turbo? Sound abasement is important. Any testing done on different style mufflers? The only muffler testing I've done is when I did muffler testing, because we had to run mufflers when I ran Engine Masters. So I did different mufflers but there was no dBA. There's no maximum dBA for that. We're just trying to make them not lose power. Can we put a 6-liter diesel on the dyno? No diesel stuff. Speaking of UFOs and Big Bangs, there's another transition. New space telescope just released pictures of the black hole in the center of our galaxy. Does that mean we're all headed there? That they won't run diesels on the engine dyno. Twas the Ramones, and the red-haired talk show host was Johnny Rotten wasn't one of the Ramones, if that's the comment. Johnny Ramone and Joey and Dee Dee and Marky. Muffler shootout. I haven't done any video of muffler shootouts. The Engine Masters, I think, did some stuff. Hey, I come home from work and chime in and listen and watch while I'm under the car. Hugh, thank you very much. Should I run a supercharger or turbo for drifting? I myself, I don't have a good feel for what's going on in a drift car. I would be more apt to run a positive displacement supercharger for that. No, oh, they were talking about a joke they played on Johnny Ryan. Okay, that makes more sense. Just put an Army Humvee turbo on a junkyard fresh 292. Nice. Lost oil pressure immediately. Uh-oh. Is there any information about LS motors on propane, like turbo LS on propane? I've never run one on propane. Can we find a lookalike LTD or whatever Uncle Buck's car was for the turbo LS swap? We need the what was the name of the what was the name of the station wagon in Vacation? Was it the Country Truckster or something like that? Still hoping for a 460 turbo Ford. Yep. Family Truckster. That's right. I knew it was Truckster or something. What do you think about the Whipple Gen 5 efficiency versus the turbo? It's not even going to be close. I don't know about the blower efficiency, like the Island, if you measure the compressor map. But the thing that it still has going against it is it takes power to drive that, and it doesn't take power to drive the turbo. So you still have 100, 200, or as much as 300 horsepower to spin the supercharger, depending on how much boost you're trying and power you're trying to make. So it will never make what a turbo does at the same power level. I mean, at the same boost level. Poor Philip stayed with you for a mile and a half on a leash. Oh yeah, that's right. They had the dog tied up. You need to restrict that. You need to restrict that LMTV turbo. The oil part is huge and does cause loss of oil pressure. They actually work good. The grandma on the roof. Yeah, was she in the like a lazy boy, or was she in a rocking chair? I can't remember. We need to test the new Zex nozzles and propane fuel. 210 foot-pounds. Yeah, you need the ratchet with the multiplier on it. She's in a rocker. I thought so. What, a folding chair? A rocking chair? Yeah, I thought it was a rocking chair. I'd like to run something on propane. The gentleman that I went out and saw that has the Atlas that he ran on propane has a couple of mixers that I could run on something. I have no idea, obviously, what I'm doing, but it can't be that difficult. Yeah, Cannonball Run was also good. If you're going to be a bear, be a grizzly. They had Joey Ramone with his 1950s haircut. Joey Ramone looks an awful lot like Howard Stern. Turbo will never make down low what a supercharger does. Depends on where you want the start screaming. Can't fit that in there. Yeah, just a normal snap-on electric torque wrench and a lot of muscle. Sometimes you just got to put a brake bar on stuff. We need liquid propane injection. I think that he just had gas mixers. That's the first one that I've ever seen in person just even start up, and we just hooked up the little, barbecue stuff to it. What's best used for smoke, ATF or old two-stroke oil? Two-stroke oil will work. ATF will smoke, but it will be more whitish. Oh, someone is suggesting brake fluid. Corvus oil, is, Dan was saying, is what they use in air show planes. We need Richard's reaction video to 25 psi, 600 horsepower diesel 4-wheel drive launch. I do like the diesel dyno explosions and the runaways. Those are awesome. I mean, it's sad that happened to somebody, but as long as nobody was hurt, but they are impressive. Yeah, and the boost becomes irrelevant on diesel stuff. It's really how much fuel you can pour to it, and the extra boost is just there to provide some air for all the fuel that's going in. Yeah, Adrian Barbeau from Gumball Rally, or from Cannonball Run, and then Emergency Plan Alpha from Gumball Rally, which was Linda Vaughn. Mark Sanchez actually has one of her cars at his place that he's doing for her. Yeah, maybe I'll have Mark on. Maybe I'll have Mark on one of the live feeds when I go down to West Tech, because he's a good guy to talk about Ford stuff, because he's been in the 5-liter game since basically the inception. That he was helping Chris Kaufman do road racing back in the day when they were doing Escort Endurance. What's the best and safest way to make 700 wheel horsepower on a 2011 6.2 GMC Denali? The thing that you need to be concerned with, making the power is easy. That's a cam and a turbo and injectors and a pump, and so that's really simple. You need to be more concerned with your drivetrain. Yeah, there's no throttle on a diesel, not a blade or anything. The throttle just shuts the fuel off. But if it breaks apart and starts drawing in its own its own oil, it's bad. So JB Turbo Monza, how are the 3800 heads going? Oh, Admiral, yeah. Why why blow by on a diesel should scare you? The runaway stuff is not good. All right, Scott, you're out, man. So Turbo Monza, you're waiting to have the shop cut the LS valve down to mimic the bigger valves before we cut the seats too. Yeah, that's smart. Let me know if you're having trouble getting that done. I can have the guys from L&R. They've got a bunch of 706, 862 heads. I can have them cut a set down, or just one valve. If that's all it is. I was in the crowd when they filmed OG Death Race 2000. Nice. That was David Carradine. He was Frankenstein, right? Oh, Todd, you picked up the Ford Focus. Nice. What year is it? hydrazine in a diesel. Yeah, that's going to be great. One more minute. So we'll close out our poll. So 82% are saying no, that the turbo will ever completely replace the supercharger. I don't think it will either. I think that there's always going to be a place for them. And that's one of the things I wanted to mention is the fact that even though we know that the turbo makes more power per pound of boost normally when we test them back to back, that's not the whole story. There's reason why all of these other ones exist. And it's cool for us, like, performance guys, that there are things to choose from. If there was only one thing, then we would all choose the same thing, and that would kind of be boring. It would be sweet to see a low horsepower 4.8 liter turbo build like 500 horsepower just for a daily driver. That's just a stock motor with boost. I have those up on the channel. All you have to do is put injectors and a pump in it and run a stock 4.8 with boost in it. It will make 500 horsepower. You just have to run a fair bit of boost. 500 flywheel horsepower. It's going to start out at about 330. So, and that won't be that much. It'll be less than 10 pounds. Lower guys are always big throttle body guys and big header guys. The big throttle body, I can see why. You definitely want to maximize the airflow going into it. The header thing, I have to test that. Casey, will they have a turbo button in electric cars? That would be the thing, is if you could do stuff like a push to pass, like momentary, like if whatever the voltage the thing is running at, we want it to be like another 50% or 100% for a short burst. You can't just lay into that and wire that thing, just stick a screwdriver or something in there so it's on all the time. But if you could put that on there to get around people or to have fun or whatever, and obviously it's going to degrade the battery life and you'd have to charge it sooner, but we should have that option. We need a VGT test. A VGT turbo. I don't see too many of those anymore. Or unless you're talking about a VGT Nissan. Yeah, squeeze your last comment. I got to go. Have you ever tested two different size carburetors on a tunnel ram? No, but I did run I ran a blower, a 671, that had two carburetors on it. We ran it on such a low power output, I turned off one of the carburetors. We disconnected it and ran it on one carburetor, and it still worked. What would be my best option for a daily driver cam for a 4.8? Like the torque cam from BTR is a good choice. Do you have a video on an HX35 turbo? I have not run that specific turbo. I've run other whole set stuff, but I don't think that one. Yes, Dean, it was fun. Anytime we get to talk about like pop culture and stuff, that's awesome. Got lots of VG turbos off the 6-liter GT37s. So are those the turbo diesel ones? Can we oversize a turbo? Is that what you want? You want it to come on soft? I think you just do that with a boost controller. That way you could have it come on relative to engine speed. Oh, it's an O2. Okay, that's good. Okay, guys, I got to get going. It is it's past my bedtime. Actually, I got more videos to do. Thank you guys all for showing up. It was an awesome night. I will see you guys all tomorrow. Boom. And